Hello and welcome to Friday TGIK, everybody. This is your weekly Kubernetes webinar live from the Heptio studios. And we like to start our episodes off saying hello from everybody joining us live in the video chat today. I am your host this week, Kris Nova. Joe, who has been doing these for a while, is out right now, and so I'll be taking over for the week. And I think I'm doing next week as well. And I did last week, so get used to me. It looks like I'm going to be around for a while. So yeah, hey folks, how's it going? We usually start off and we will say hi in the chat and call out some of our friends who are joining us live from around the world. And we're going to be able to talk live with them as we're going through and debugging Ballerina, a new cloud-native programming language we're going to be looking at today. So to start off, let's say hello. Looks like our very first one, who was a little bit early, was Suresh. Hello from Hamburg. Lamati, it's good to see you. And then real quick, while we're on the topic of Lamati, we wanted to give a big shout out. They sent us over a special TGIK present for me and Joe, which was totally some of this homemade honey and like spicy, I think this is spicy honey. We haven't tried it yet, but it says hot on it. And I love like hot spicy food. Like I grow ghost peppers, so I'm all about trying out some of this crazy awesome honey. And I used to make honey mead back when I used to own a farm, which that's like a different story for a different day. So getting some of this like nice stuff from Lamati's bees is really exciting. So big shout out, thank you so much. I think what we're gonna do is make a little bit of simple syrup with some of the honey here and try to make a couple of different types of cocktails with it. So we'll let you know how it goes. So yeah, we also have hello from San Diego, California. We have Peter, Copenhagen. It's good to see you, Olav. Zolt from Finland. Lamati asks, how's the hand doing? I like promised myself I wasn't gonna actually show like my hand for like more than just like a flyby on TGIK because it's it's an injury and not everybody wants to see that. But the hand is doing much better, and I was given sort of a gag gift as like this wooden hand here, so I can actually show this one because this one is actually like not offensive at all. But yeah, my hand is doing better. I've got 7 out of 10 fingers working like at full capacity, and the other ones are slowly catching up. And I'm going to be doing a little bit of low-class hiking and rock climbing this weekend, working on my T-Rex style rock climbing holds with my fingers that are working. So we're going to have a relatively shorter episode, maybe like an hour and 15 minutes today, because I got to go jump on a flight and get down to California for some rock climbing this weekend. So yeah, let's see who else we got here. We have hello from Bonn, greetings from the Eastern Flatlands near DC. Good to see you, Joe Thompson. We have hello from Saudi. We have Walid. Carlos says, hola, Kris. Good to see you, Carlos. Elisiano says we can't hear you. Just kidding. Which is funny because there's actually been a time or two where we've like run into some technical difficulties, and I've totally been in here talking to myself, and like somebody comes in and is like, hey, just so you know, like nobody can hear you. So that's really funny. So we have Noah from Las Vegas. Lamati says the second jar is jalapeno jelly, which is the stuff here. So gonna try out some jalapeno jelly. That's what I really want to put in a cocktail, to be honest. We have Jan, hi, Kris from Duisburg, Germany. We have Aaron from Florida. And we have Samira from Mountain View and TV, one of my favorite places. Pav, hello from Denver, my old stomping grounds. I lived in Denver for 8 years, or I guess, around Denver. Folks from Denver would be upset. They'd be like, you didn't technically live in Denver those 8 years. But I did live in Denver for 2 of those 8 years and around Denver for 8 years. Spent some time in Boulder, and Colorado is like where I learned to climb. So Colorado is a beautiful place. Lucky for you that you're going to be there today. I wish I was there. Hi from Brazil. Pablo says hi from Chile. Gus says, Friday again, TGIK evening. Hello from Hamburg. Good to see you, Goose. Joe Thompson says, stick to the jug holds for a while, climbing maybe. I mean, let's be honest here, like I'm probably not even going to use my left hand for anything more than like maybe handing myself a carabiner. I'll pretty much just be doing like some low-class moves and using my right hand for everything, and if I can't make the move, I'm just not going to make it. Mazafer says, hello from Dubai. So yeah, anyway, folks from all around the world, we're going to kind of stop with the hellos there. We'll take a look in the chat here in a few minutes. But folks from all around the world join us. We go through, we do some live debugging. One of the things that we sort of try to do here on TGIK is familiarize ourselves a little bit with what we're going to be talking about beforehand, but we don't over-familiarize ourselves or over-prepare, so there's still this like authentic moment of like this is the first time I'm doing this, and let's try to go through it together. So I kind of depend on people in the chat, so if you have any ideas or if you want to shout out, feel free to chime in, and we'll try to run something. And without further ado, we'll jump into like the first sort of little section of the episode here. So, switching over to my screen, we have our handy TGIK GitHub repository that we look at the very beginning of every episode. It's Heptio, or github.com/Heptio/TGIK. We have an episodes directory, and here in our episodes directory, we have episode 42, which is an exciting episode number. If anybody has ever read the Douglas Adams book, they're familiar with the significance of the number 42, so I was really pumped to get to do this episode. We're talking about Ballerina today. And I guess real quick on Ballerina, if we look at, I'm going to pull up Twitter. If we look at the tweet for TGIK this week, I had called it, let's see where it is. Where is it? Right here. I had called it a cloud-native scripting language. And I picked this I chose the word scripting because it had less characters than programming. And I had some folks mention that the word scripting usually implies an interpreted language, which, of course, Ballerina, if you go and you read the documentation, is not an interpreted language at all. It is a compiled language. It compiles to bytecode, and we're going to be doing some compiling and running the bytecode today. So just as like a pedantic way of clarifying, Ballerina is not, in fact, a scripting language if the word scripting to you implies interpreted language. It is, however, a Turing-complete regular programming language, complete with a standard library. And we're going to learn more about Ballerina later, but just wanted to call out that one little nuisance before we jumped into what's new in Kubernetes this week. For the show notes here, we have a handful of links, and we'll kind of go through these and show folks what I've noticed and what I've sort of had like my ear to the ground listening in the Kubernetes community this week. So the first one is, as I was learning about Ballerina, this quick tour is actually a really, really great resource, and there's a bit of a really fun surprise at the end. So if you want to go through and learn Ballerina on your own, maybe you're watching the episode and the episode inspires you to go and learn more, this is a really great place for you to kind of go and get started, and it's going to go through the basics of what we're doing, most of which we'll be doing today live, and then you can go through and you'll get the code on your own and you can see it there. So the next one I found was this really great article here, and I think I can sign in with Google. Let me sign in with my Heptio email really quick. And I just wanted everyone to go and actually, if you can drop a quick +1 on this article. This is a fantastic article, and they haven't had any claps yet. So let's see if we can't get them some claps so that more folks on the internet come across this article here. But this is a really great example of actually doing what we're going to be doing today. And this is written by Anuruddha. I'm really horrible about pronouncing names. I'm so sorry, but deeply respect your work, and thank you for doing it. This is another great resource as well. This one is specific to Kubernetes, so it goes pretty quick into like a simple service, and then it talks about some Kubernetes objects and how you can create them. And then we go in and we talk about the Ballerina file and generating a Docker file, and then ultimately we end with our super familiar command here, kubectl apply -f, which to me that's sort of like the end of the races, and that's like where the rubber meets the road and something is now running in Kubernetes. So this is a good resource as well, and we might even jump back into it and steal some one-liners from this article throughout the episode today as well. So let's go back to our TGIK repo. So the other one, I wanted to put a link to the IntelliJ IDE. So this is what I'm going to be using today to actually write the Ballerina source code for our example service. And we're going to explore this plugin from IntelliJ that supports Ballerina. Ballerina is a relatively newer programming language, so finding a good IDE, like anytime you get a new programming language, there's always this like initial, which IDE do I use? Is it supported here? Is it supported there yet? I'm a Gogland IntelliJ kind of girl. I wrote Scala before I wrote Go. So to me, IntelliJ and Gogland are very intuitive, and I've been using them for a while, so I was pumped to see that there was a Ballerina plugin with IntelliJ. So if you want to grab IntelliJ, that's how I started, and as I mentioned earlier, there's a little bit of surprise at the end. So if you want to wait for the surprise, you don't actually have to download an IDE. Ballerina has some cool tricks up its sleeve that we're going to look at a little bit later. And real quick, it looks like we have some folks talking in the chat, so I'm going to do my weekly endorsement of Diet Coke and read what folks are saying in the chat for just a quick second before we move on to the next item here. So yeah, Matthias says, hi everyone, especially Goose from Berlin. Have fun learning Ballerina. And Suresh says, VS Code does have a plugin for Ballerina. Yes, it does. And when the first time I saw somebody write Ballerina, I jumped on a video conference call with Dimitri, who works on the source code. He's one of the experts. He used VS Code and suggested VS Code as well. So that's another really great IDE for folks to use. I just, like I said earlier, I've just been using IntelliJ and Goglin for years, so everything I need is already configured, and I have a pretty good idea where to find stuff if I need it. So it's just a little more comfy for me. I think Joe uses VS Code, so maybe he could give you guys some pointers on getting Ballerina up and running if he ever tries it out. Okay, cool. So what's next? Oh, Remus wrote this fabulous article I wanted to share with folks. And we were just talking about this the other day when we were doing ingress in Kubernetes with traffic. I think that was last week or the week before. But this is an article about how you can set up wildcard certs. And so this is actually going to solve the problem of trying to recreate TLS certificates for all of your subdomains. So Remus, he's a friend of ours, a friend of mine from the Deus days, and I've worked with him closely in open source, and so I saw that he wrote this article and was like, oh yeah, I should totally come check this out. It's actually a really great article. So if you're ever interested in learning about wildcard TLS with ingress in Kubernetes, Remus did a lot of the work for us and gave us a lot to get started here. So hats off to Remus, and if you want to run wildcard TLS with Contour, a Heptio tool that Dave Cheney had worked on in Kubernetes, this is a really great starting point. So yeah, thanks again. And then I don't think we can give Remus like a +1 anywhere. I usually like to give folks a +1 if I really enjoy an article and if I find value in it. So maybe, it looks like this is his own website, so I don't know if we can give him any awesome internet points or not. If anybody finds anything, just let me know in the chat and I'll come back and do it. So next we have, okay, cool. So this next one is Golang specific. So I've talked to a few folks who have been watching me do the TGIKs over the past couple of, probably 2 or 3 months. I've been kind of easing into them. And one of the things that folks have kind of asked for is a little bit more of the Golang 101. Let's bring up some interesting aspects of the Go programming language, considering Kubernetes is written in Go and a lot of folks write Go. So this week I found a really fantastic question on our Golang, which is the subreddit for Golang. I'm a moderator for it. I do a really horrible job at actually keeping up with my moderator homework. I was able to approve a post in this specific thread just a few minutes ago, so that was exciting. But it brings up a really great question that I wanted to sort of just talk about here for a minute or two before we jump into Ballerina. So if we pull up this, the question basically is, what is the best practices for returning? Do we want to return this user struct by itself? Do we want to return a pointer to a user struct? Do we want to return a slice of user structs? Maybe a pointer to a slice of users? A pointer to a slice of user pointers? What is the best practice here? And I get asked this question quite a lot. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit here. There we go. That looks a little bit better. I get asked this question quite a lot, which is what is the best practice, and why would you use a pointer, or why would you not use a pointer, or how do you know when it's a good idea to return a pointer or even deal with pointers in Go in the first place? And pointers in Go, they're similar in some aspects of pointers in other programming languages, but they're also very unique. And I have a really simplified way that I answer the question, which this follows sort of my personal coding philosophy of step 1, make it work, step 2, make it fast, step 3, make it pretty. So in the name of getting step 1 out of the way first, one of the big concrete technical reasons for returning a pointer type is because it's nillable. Meaning if I wanted to return this specific type here, hello Aaron from San Francisco, I could also, instead of returning an initialized empty pointer of user slice, I could just return nil. And then you really see this pattern in Golang a lot, especially with errors in the error interface. If error is not equal to nil, take some action. So it just gives you this ability to return nil instead of an initialized empty version of whatever you're returning. If this wasn't a pointer, we would actually have to create a slice of user structs that just doesn't have anything inside of it, but is still of that type, instead of returning nil. So that's one concrete reason. And even in this case, this is still a little, I would prefer to see right here, instead of seeing a pointer to a slice, I would prefer to see a slice of pointers. And that way we can at least still iterate, we can wrap or loop over the slice, and then we can just check each individual element for nil. And that's a little bit more idiomatic, and that way you know that you're always going to go through the construct of writing a for loop afterwards if you plan on iterating through whatever you return. This last one is a little redundant. I don't really see a really good concrete reason for this, other than, actually I don't. I really just don't even see a good reason for this. Why would you have a pointer to a slice of pointers? It seems like you should kind of do one or the other. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, like, if you look at SDKs, specifically like the Amazon SDK, you'll notice that every type is a pointer in the SDK. A Boolean is actually a pointer to a Boolean. A string is actually a pointer to a string, which is a bit weird because strings are already pointers in Golang. So anyway, I'm kind of getting off in the weeds here. But if you want to return nil, you can return a pointer. This is a great thread. Come check it out. Okay, let's get into Ballerina. And if folks have questions there, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm happy to answer as well. Okay, so the first thing, let's jump into our Ballerina quick tour. And before we go in here, I'm going to open up a new tab. Let's go through the download instructions for Ballerina, and I'll show you somewhere where I kind of got goofed up along the way. So hopefully folks don't hit that here. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get started. You can go to this Getting Started section here, ballerina.io/learn/getting started, and you can download and install the Ballerina packages here. So I'm running on my MacBook Pro right now, so I downloaded the OS X package right here. So I downloaded it, and it's a fairly large file, and it took about 5 minutes on our office internet here for me to download this file. And if we jump into terminal, we can go to its library/capital Ballerina. This is where Ballerina installed to by default. So if you actually go through the little wizard and you hit like I accept the license and agree to everything, you'll get this on your MacBook as well. And in this Ballerina subfolder inside the larger capital Ballerina folder, we have a specific version. So we can go into this, and if we explore this package, it looks pretty familiar to anybody who's ever navigated a basic like repository installation before. This is actually really similar to how Golang installs in my user local Go. So I could actually go in and show you user local Go. It looks strikingly similar. We like have we have a bin package here. We also have like a lib here and here, and we have a source here and here. So like familiar constructs, they ship in very similar ways, and this is kind of normal for programming language distribution patterns. So anyway, here in Ben, if we go into Ben, we see we have Ballerina, which of course we can execute. We also have Broker and composer.bat. And more on those a little bit later. If we go back into our Go path, which by default, I just put tools in my Go path regardless of if they're Go or not, just because mentally I always go, I'm going to my Go path, that's where I work on software. I don't really care if it's Go or not, and it gives me a way of like still sorting and keeping track of all my different repositories regardless of whatever programming language they're in. A lot of people would disagree with me there. A lot of people would agree with me, but that's the way I do it. So we go to github.com, we go to Heptio, and then here in our TGIK repo, we have episodes, and we have episode 42, which is the episode we're on this week, and this is going to kind of be our home base for the episode. And if I actually echo out my path here, you'll see we have QBuilder Ben, but also here we have library Ballerina. That bin directory that we just explored is also in my path. The way I define my path is in my bash profile, which I'm not going to show you because there's secrets in there. And the documentation for Ballerina says we will set the path for you, but I still had to go in and manually add that bin directory into my path. So if you download Ballerina and you go in the command line and you type Ballerina and it can't find it, try to restart your terminal. If it still can't find it, you might have to go in and edit your path manually and append to the end of your path manually. And if anybody wants help with that, I can put an example in the README. Just open up an issue and I'll write you the one-liner you need to do to get it working. So anyway, Ballerina is now in our path. We're in our episode 42 directory, and I can type Ballerina, and I get our handy-dandy help menu here. And this looks super familiar to the same type of help menu we would see in a lot of Go and a lot of Kubernetes style programs that give us like a verb we can run and a quick little explanation of kind of what this does. So as I was kind of learning about Ballerina, I'm like, this thing is written mostly in Java. So if we go and we look in the github.com/ballerina, I think it's ballerina platform/ballerina lang, this repo here, GitHub has this handy feature. If you click on this colored bar here, it'll actually tell you the percentages of different languages inside the repository. And the majority of this is written in Java. And I'm like, okay, but I just ran as like a static, what it felt like a static library here, static binary, but I'm like unsure what this thing is. So I did the file command, and I did ballerina, bin, ballerina. And what file does is it actually tells you what's going on here. And this tells us right away this is actually a born again shell script. It's just a bash script. So I bet we can open this thing up in Emacs and actually see that it's got to be doing something under the covers for us. So bin, ballerina, and we can see what's going on here. And yep, as expected, this is the wrapper for the Ballerina executable. So in a weird way, Ballerina compiles to a binary, but the actual Ballerina command line tool is a wrapper here written in bash. So pros and cons to that. Anytime you write bash, you can get into trouble. But here at the very end, you can see we have all of these Java commands defined. And yes, we are in fact just running a Java program, which totally cool. But still has the feel of the statically typed binaries that you would get with like a programming language like Golang. So anyway, we can get out of there. We didn't make any changes. We just, for those of you who don't know Emacs, all I did was quit. And we can do an alias b is equal to ballerina. We all know I love my single letter aliases for commonly used commands here during a TGIK episode. So now we're going to be able to just type simply b, lowercase b, and we get our ballerina shell script that wraps our Java program, and we can do things with ballerina. So let's jump back in the documentation really quick. So up here at the top, we have open source, which this could ultimately lead to the GitHub repo we just looked at, and we have learn. Here in learn, we have this quick tour, which is the one I suggested folks to check out, and we have ballerina by example and ballerina by guide. And these are, like, for a programming language that is so new, the fact that it's this mature is pretty outstanding, pretty astonishing. It took other programming languages a couple years to get to the maturity level where they had examples and they had tutorials that were complete, like we see here in Ballerina. So there's really some great documentation here that you can really go and get lost in if you wanted to. I don't think we're going to be able to get off in the weeds today too much, but there's a lot of stuff here. If you go into examples alone, you can see we have a whole page of examples here to pick from. And this is where me mentally evaluating a new programming language, somebody who is passionate about Go, somebody who's been writing Go for a while, I'm already kind of curious, what are we seeing here? What types of examples have the authors of Ballerina gone out of their way to give us because they feel like they're important? And it looks pretty standard. And in fact, there's a lot of similarities between Ballerina and Go. I was kind of impressed when I first came through here and started looking at it. Hi, Jeremy. Lamati says, thanks. Sorry, I'm reading the chat right now. We have good evening from Russia. Lamati had a question. Says, any idea if Ballerina has been added to the various brew, APK, yum, Etsy repos? I don't know, but I bet we could totally do brew install Ballerina and just see what it says. Updating homebrew. And of course, I'm going to break everything now live on TGIK and have to fix my install here. And Samira says, Ballerina compiles down to bytecode, not Java bytecode, and is executed by the Ballerina runtime. Both the compiler and the runtime is written in Java at the moment. Okay, thank you for that explanation, Samira. So the bytecode is what we'll be executing, and it's not Java bytecode. And for those folks at home, Java has its own specific type of bytecode, and that's why you need the runtime and everything to execute Java code. So before this gets too far along, I'm going to cancel this. It looks like we're just updating my homebrew right now. So if somebody else wants to go in and let us know if they can do a brew install or check the other repos and just drop a quick note in chat, that would be much appreciated. Let's see what I can zoom in here. Bam, bam, bam. And I'll recenter. And I'm just going to close that process. Like my fans just kicked on. We were like doing some serious downloading just then. Okay, so let's go back to our TGIK path here. Go, source, github.com, Heptio, TGIK, episodes 042. And we were looking at our examples. So I came in, and of course I wanted to see like a hello world, and then I noticed there was a lot of different flavors of hello world. So we have, hello world service, which this is going to be our starting point today. We have, hello world parallel, which already I'm like, oh, this looks like a pretty common multiple worker pattern. So it looks like Ballerina is a concurrent or parallelized programming language as well, meaning that you can instruct your program to try to do more than one thing at a time. It doesn't execute linearly like an interpreted language would. So that's pretty exciting. And then I came through and was like what else is kind of baked into the standard library? So we have these two encodings. We have JSON and XML, which are super common. I would say probably JSON RPC and XML are probably the two big ones I see mostly in doing any sort of integration work in the internet, today, circa 2016, 17, and 18. We have object, so already I'm like, oh, there's some object-oriented principles baked into this. That's pretty cool. Sure enough, we have a section on concurrency, and it looks like we have a definition of workers. We have a fork and a join, and then this one really caught my eye, which was the worker interactions. And if you actually look at this, here on line 7 gives an example that if you've ever written concurrency in Golang before, this looks very familiar. In fact, I think syntactically this is almost exactly the same as Golang. The only big difference is the semicolon delimiting the end of the line here that allows you to communicate between two different workers. So here it looks like we have this worker 1 defined on line 3, and we have this worker 2, W2, defined on line 13, and if you go through and actually look at the code, looks like we're sending some information to worker 2, receiving it further down, and actually echoing out some communication here. This first echo is, from worker 1 to worker 2, the second one's the other way, and showing how you can actually send messages back and forth between your two concurrent processes. Which again, this is one of the big wins in Golang that I think really helped Go take off, was this the concept of channels and how you communicate between concurrent processes in Go. So Ballerina just ships with this out of the box as well. So already we're really, really impressed with how Ballerina has come together here and how far along they are already. So we have basic functions, we have different values and types. Looks like we have tables, we have maps, we have records, arrays. These are all pretty normal programming primitives. I kind of have an idea of what they're going to be just because I've written so many different programming languages. This one really jumps out at me, tuples. These are really big in Python, especially in the artificial intelligence and machine learning communities where you can return groups of types. And then of course we have basic Turing complete logic, which is if and else. Let's see what folks are saying. Nicholas Lane, hello from Seattle. Grant Totten, which at first your name looked like Grand Teton, and I was really excited because one of my friends is climbing that this weekend. Hello from St. John, New Brunswick. Ismaili says, what is the purpose of creating a new programming language that forks Go? So I don't think this necessarily forks Go, and I think the concerns of Ballerina are a little more focused on being cloud native, and we're going to see that a little bit later when we start learning about annotations. And I do know there is this whole philosophy up here that you can click on that talks about in detail the technical reasons why Ballerina was created and why it's a new programming language. So I think just the technical problems that they're solving and how they're solving them is a little bit different between Ballerina and Go. And then the long-term goals of what we, the scope of the standard library. Ballerina ships with a package called Ballerina X that includes Kubernetes support natively in the standard library. The Go programming language absolutely does not have Kubernetes support and probably never will. In fact, the Kubernetes community is responsible for writing the support for interacting with Kubernetes, and that's where the client Go project comes from. So already we're starting to see The Golang authors have nothing to do with Kubernetes. The Kubernetes community writes their SDK. Here in Ballerina, the programming language authors said, you know what, we're going to just bundle all this together and support it all, which is exciting. So come through here. If you want to take a peek, looks like we have Swagger, gRPC, we have basic routing, we can do basic socket programming, support for HTTP, HTTPS, even HTTP2. Even looks like we have some JDBC database libraries, H2 for our folks who like to use Hadoop, and a MySQL client baked into the standard library as well. And then here it looks like we have even more input-output, JSON, CSV, so parsing records, whether they're coming in the form of XML or JSON or comma-separated values or whatever, even just raw, looks like just a raw data stream. So a lot of stuff that I've used in the past, doing integration work, building APIs, building out business logic, baked into the standard library. So this is pretty exciting stuff. Suresh says, I hope we would be able to write a new CRD using Ballerina. Suresh, I think that is a great question. And I think if it does not support it already, it should be pretty simple. When we look at annotations and actually creating our deployment for our program, you're going to see how easy it is to define Kubernetes objects. And I'm assuming, I don't know if we can look this up or not, you should be able to define a CRD the same way. But great question. So without further ado, let's run a hello world in Ballerina. And then we're going to get it in a Docker file, and then we're going to write a deployment, and we're going to get it running in Kubernetes. And I might even, if we have time, actually make that public so folks at home can interact with it. That seemed to be a lot of fun last time when we got fabulous.af up and running. So maybe we could try to do that again. Looks like we have some questions here. Arul says, brew info ballerina. That was the command I was thinking of, which will just give you information on something, does return some, ballerina stable 0.975.1, which is what I'm running, the flexible, powerful, and beautiful programming language. Okay, so back to our quick tour. So here this suggests that we do a ballerina init, and if you actually read this little blurb here, I'm going to paraphrase it for you. It says that they basically create the hello world service for you. So we're actually going to go through and pull the example and actually create a new ballerina file and a new directory and push that up. So we're going to go to ballerina by example, and we're going to take our hello world service. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because I kind of want things to break, because I want to show folks like some tricks I've already learned with debugging ballerina code when something goes wrong. So we're going to copy this into our TGIK repository, and we're going to create a new directory for it. So everything we're doing for the episode will be isolated in its own directory. So we're waiting for IntelliJ to come up. I don't know if you can, so let me move this over here. So we have TGIK. We'll open up this, and then I think we got to go into presentation mode so folks at home can see. So we want to go to View, enter presentation mode. It does the same thing that Goglin does, and I can sort of resize it. And then I want to go View, Tool Windows, and I want to see the project, so I have my little navigator on the side. Perfect. And this, to me, looks like a good starting point for writing some code. So this is the code that I had been playing with before the episode that I have not pushed up yet, and we're going to keep it here in case we need a working example later, but we're going to create a new folder in examples, and we're going to call it new directory. We're going to call it live. And then really quick, what I did offline before the episode started was I came up here to the top, and I did, I opened up preferences. So IntelliJ preferences. Over here on the left, we have plugins, and I typed in Ballerina. At first, I did not find it, so there was like a button here that said like search repositories. I clicked that button, was able to install it, and now it's a plugin, and I have it enabled here. That's what that little checkbox means. So that's how I get things like in my new live directory here. You see I can actually create a Ballerina file. So that's pretty cool. So here in live, we want to actually do just that. We do want to create a new Ballerina file. So we're going to call it tgik.bal. And pretty cool. It imports Ballerina IO, and we have IO println, hello world, and our friendly semicolon at the end. And println here, I'm assuming behaves like it does in Golang, where it's going to print out the string hello world, and there'll be a new line at the end of the string, and that will bring us back to our terminal prompt with a nice, neat new line. So we can do B for ballerina. We can do run. And here we have examples, live, tgik.bal. B not found. Oh, alias B is equal to ballerina. So if we do B run, and poof, there's our hello world. So pretty easy. We went from downloading the Ballerina packages to just adding it to our path to getting the plugin installed in IntelliJ, and already we have our hello world up and running. So to make this a little more complex, let's go ahead and create an HTTP service. Like, why not? Oh, and I need to quit opening up GoLand. The icons look like really similar on my MacBook here, so I'm actually going to move that one way off to the side so I don't click it again. So let's go back into IntelliJ, not GoLand, and let's paste in what we just copied to our buffer earlier, which is this example hello world service. Poof. So right away, I'm going to add some white space here to separate this service definition away from our imports. It looks like we're importing the HTTP. I don't know the right vernacular here, so I'm going to call it a package because that's what we call it in Golang. But if that's not what it's called, somebody please correct me. I want to make sure we're using correct wording wherever we can. And we're also importing the Ballerina log package as well. Here we have this service definition, which if we go back in our docs, we can go to, not quick tour, we want to go to learn by example, and then I'm just going to do a quick search for service, because I want to find the actual documentation on it. It may not be in here. We might actually have to go and pull like the API documentation. How to test Ballerina code, how to document Ballerina code, how to extend, package and API documentation. This is what we want. So over here on the left, we have all of these first-class citizens. We have service. I bet we can find it. Service endpoint, regular service, HTTP service. I don't see it. I see endpoints, I see objects, I see records. Is it a function? Okay, anyway, let's go back to our code. We're getting off in the weeds. We define our service. We tell it it's an HTTP service. This might be a keyword that we're importing here. And we say the name is hello, and we're going to bind port 9090. So, going through and actually learning what the syntax is here, I'm not quite there as a Ballerina user yet, but as a Java user, this looks and feels, pretty familiar. I wrote object-oriented PHP, object-oriented Java in Scala in the long ago, before containers and Kubernetes were a thing. So this looks pretty familiar to me. I would feel comfortable looking at this, and it starts to make sense. And then in here, we have this, what looks basically like a smaller function. This thing is called say hello, and we say we're going to create this new endpoint called caller. Looks like this is a little bit of implicity going on here. And we have HTTP requests that we're passing into the function as well. And then here we have HTTP response. We're going to new that. So we're going to create a new HTTP response. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to call the set payload method on the response and return hello world. Samira says service is a first-class entity, just like a function object in Ballerina. And also Samira confirmed that it is in fact called a package. Thank you, Samira, for validating a lot of the stuff I'm saying and doing right now. Again, I started looking at Ballerina this week, so I am totally a Ballerina noob. But I was able to get something running in Kubernetes, so I think that's a really great testament that you don't have to be an expert on a programming language to get a basic service up and running in Kubernetes, which is pretty rad. So we do set payload, we say hello and world, and then at the very end we do caller, which remember this is our endpoint that we're passing in here. We're going to call the respond method. Again, Samira, let me know if I'm using any wrong wording here, but this is just what I would call this from Java Scala days, so that's what I'm going to be using. We're going to pass in res, which is our response, and then we have this but keyword, and we say it looks like there's some error handling here. We have an error. We're going to call it e, which if you've ever written Java and dealt with Java exceptions, lowercase e is really common for Java exceptions. And then it says we're going to print this error sending response, error is equal to e, which we're defining here. And then, of course, our semicolon at the end to say that we're done with this particular statement. So yeah, that looks like a pretty straightforward web service. It's got everything I've ever really cared about configuring when I'm looking at a web service. It's got a port that we're listening on, it's got a name of the service, and it looks like it's got a single endpoint called hello. So let's go ahead and try to run this and see what happens. So jumping back in our terminal, we can go and rerun our brun examples live tgik.bal again. And again, this whole brun, the name of the Ballerina file, this is very familiar to folks who have written Go. Go basically behaves the exact same way, takes the same syntax. Go run the name of some Go file that has a main function and is in the package main, and it usually works. So this is just very intuitive for folks like me coming from Go and coming from Java. So we're going to do run, and then we get some logging here. It says Ballerina initiating services in tgik.bal, and it started in HTTP WS endpoint 0.0.0.90 or 9090 for the port number. So I bet if we open up Google Chrome, we can hit loop back, which is 127.0.0.1, and then we want to do, we said port 9090. Here, no matching service found in path. So I had, like I mentioned earlier, I had a demo earlier this week where somebody showed me Ballerina, so I kind of cheated a little bit here. But on first glance, I would kind of be like expecting our root path here to resolve to whatever we defined here in the source code. But actually what we're doing here is we're defining a couple of things that you may not like, it may not click right away for you. The first one is the root directory is going to be hello, and then we're going to be able to hit the say hello endpoint. So we're actually going to structure that like 127.0.0.1 port 9090 / hello / say hello. And I bet no matching resource found for path hello say hello method get. That should be, is it a capital H? I bet that's what's going on. Poof, hello world. Okay, so we were able to call, like, this is the higher level construct, this is the lower level endpoint, and we were able to form that naturally using our Ballerina source code here, hello and say hello. Samira says it should be localhost 9090, hello, say hello. Absolutely. So another thing that Dimitri showed me, and this was pretty handy, is this concept of annotations with Ballerina. So if we go back into our documentation here, I bet we can find in our quick start, quick tour here, we can kind of catch up to where we are already. So here's a basic service that's defined, which is similar to the one that we pulled from the example. And then if you come down here, we see this little primitive. Excuse me, got something in my throat. Which again, coming from Java, you know this magic @ symbol means, sort of gives you like an annotation, and then you can write custom tooling and custom logic to sort of support this if you place it above a function or nest it into your source code directly. So the first thing I notice here is we have this HTTP service config, and it says base path is equal to /. So if we take this annotation and we paste it here, we actually can rerun our Ballerina command here. Why that initializes, we're going to jump back into Google Chrome, go back to our loopback address, refresh. It broke again, but guess what? If we go through and we change hello, which we're now rewriting to our root path, now we can just hit say hello directly. So already we're starting to realize that Ballerina is totally set up to be very expressive and to be very elegant in the form of like how you would define a RESTful service. And then here between lines 8 and 21, we've been able to tell Ballerina where we want an endpoint listening. The request, we have access to the raw HTTP request, which is coming in here as HTTP request. And I bet if we just look and see, we actually get some tab hinting request dot. Actually, I think we're not doing dot. It's you do the arrow thing. And you can see we're getting tab hinting built right into our IDE here. And I think if we do request dot, you can even see we have all of these wonderful functions. And then here on the right, we have the types that they return. Ballerina is a strongly typed programming language, just like the Go program. Well, I don't want to say that, but it's a strongly typed programming language. So anyway, we have access to the raw HTTP request. We can totally pull information out of it. And we have this access to this new HTTP response, which I bet if we come here and we do res dot, you can see we can add headers, we can create an entity, we can do binary payloads, we can get headers, we can return JSON payloads. Like, there's a lot of convenience baked into this for us. So you're starting to see that Ballerina is totally catered to writing microservices, to writing APIs, to using the HTTP protocol, which is one of the big wins for it right out of the box, is we're getting a lot of expression here in a very few lines of code. So again, we have our say hello endpoint, and I bet we could come through. I'm just guessing here. Like, this is how I learn programming languages, is I just try stuff out. We could say hello, and I bet we could do say goodbye. And I don't know if we're going to get yelled at for using the same variables. I don't know how scoping works in Ballerina. Scoping is usually within a curly brace like this and this. What is the scope of a variable name? Does it end at the curly brace, or does it extend outside of the curly brace? Hello, Hozu. It's good to see you again. So let's see if we can get say hello and say goodbye up and running. So we come here. Let's cancel this with Control-C, rerun it. So it's running. So we have say hello, and if we came in and said say goodbye, goodbye world, poof. Okay, so we've got two endpoints, access to the HTTP request, access to a new HTTP response, and a full standard library that's Turing complete, object-oriented, and concurrent for us to do whatever the heck we want to with these HTTP requests and responses. I'm not a Ballerina programmer, so I'm not going to like try to write some crazy advanced logic. We're going to keep our hello world pretty simple, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Kubernetes annotations and what that means for Kubernetes. But so far, this is starting to look pretty intuitive for a user who is writing APIs and writing web services and microservices in a programming language. I know trying to get something like what we have here up and running in Go, you could probably get it in 30 lines or so if you really wanted to like slim it down. But usually, especially with tools like Gorilla Mux and some of the other ones, you're going to see all of the logic we have defined here spread across multiple files, spread across multiple functions. We usually have some concept of a router that you have to map this request type to this endpoint to this function, and then the function gets an access to the request and the response. So there's some similarities, but this just seems a little bit more simplistic, and again, everything I need to configure is kind of right here in a very short space. So that is writing a basic web service in Ballerina with the service config base path. So let's go back into our documentation here. It looks like we can also add this resource config, and we could do methods equal to post. So I bet if we paste this here, we can now change our GET request to a POST request. Let's see what happens. And I bet, oh, compilation contains errors. I'm wondering if I can only do one of these annotations at a time, maybe? That looks syntactically correct for the most part. Okay, anyway, we can try to get a post up and running later. Let's stick with GET and see if we can get GET request running in Kubernetes before we do anything else. So we had a quick question from Mozufer Haga, which was, is it possible to access file system API from Ballerina to load files and other stuff? I think the answer is yes, absolutely. If we come into our Ballerina, let's see, we want to go to our examples. I'm assuming this is the IO stuff, if I had to guess, which is this stuff over here, byte.io. And yep, right here we have io.openFile, file path, and a permission. And it looks like we have some concept of channels, and here we have an example of writing bytes to a file. So yeah, I would imagine that Ballerina comes complete with standard primitives for interacting with the file system, navigating the file system, mutating the file system, writing data to some sort of persistent storage, writing data to WebSockets, you name it, I think you're going to get it with Ballerina. Samira says you can put the resource config annotation at the resource level, say hello and say goodbye. Samira, I really want to say thank you for a very verbose comment there. That actually helps me out quite a bit, the fact that you made a full, complete sentence that told me exactly what to do. So thank you. And what Samira was saying was, we can go here. So let's make say goodbye a post request. And we can paste that down and above the say goodbye. So now let's try to run this thing again. Ballerina run examples live tgik.bal, listening on port 9090. So I bet if we come here to say goodbye, does not work as expected. And if we go to say hello, it should work as expected. And I bet if we go in our terminal, open up a new tab, zoom in, resize, curl. We're going to just do localhost because I know that's in my Etsy host already. Localhost 9090 / say goodbye. I can't, is it capital X post? Is this? I think that's the right syntax. No matching resource, say goodbye method. Let's see what the docs say. I don't use curl very often, folks. Let's see, is there a curl example here? Oh, -x post. Yeah, I thought I did that. So they did HTTP : so let's try that really quick. So curl HTTP : / Let's run this again. Localhost 9090, say goodbye, -x post. No matching resource found for path, say goodbye. Why is this not working? Oh, right there. That explains it. We are defining a new path. So I bet if we just drop off the say goodbye from the end here, and we keep our -x. Oh my gosh, why is this being all weird over here? Let's resize my terminal. I think my commands are writing over each other a little bit. Okay, so we have method post. Let's try that. Goodbye world. Perfect. Okay, so that's pretty handy. So for service config, we can change the base path of our service, which changed hello to /, which is still why we had say hello and say goodbye in points after that. Then we have resource config, which tells us the method is post, and we can rewrite the path here as well. So with both slashes combined here and here, we actually don't have any endpoint defined at all, and we were able to just send a post request to get say goodbye. Okay, so we're getting pretty interesting behavior that allows us to have some pretty flexible web services and makes it really, really easy to change where all this stuff is working from. So already, I could auto-generate a lot of this based off of a Swagger spec. I'm guessing there's some Swagger packages in Ballerina already, and this is starting to look like it's pretty easy for me as a software engineer to be pretty expressive and to make changes quickly to a web service. Okay, so we have say hello, we have say goodbye. I'm going to change this one to back to say goodbye, which I think is what it would default to otherwise for when we run this in Kubernetes. And let's look at the Kubernetes annotations that we can also add here. So if we go back to our TGIK repo, we're going to pull up the blog I talked about a little bit earlier. So let's scroll down to 42, scroll down, 5 minutes with Ballerina. And so we have a pretty similar program running on our end that we were able to validate does work locally. So we know that it works on my computer. So now it's just getting it up in Kubernetes. It looks like they also have a service config. And then they're saying go ahead and run it and test it, do your hello world. And then here's where we start to enter Kubernetes land. So here we are defining the Kubernetes deployment and enable liveness is equal to true. We define an ingress, which is host name is equal to ABC, and we define a service, which is service type node port. So these are Kubernetes level primitives. The directive host name can be found in a Kubernetes ingress. So I bet if we actually go to Kubernetes ingress example, and I did ingress last week, so folks actually got to see me write a host name, but I want to find the YAML here. Spec path. Where is hostname? I know it's in here. Let's look at my stateful app. So this is the application we ran last week and that I use for demos a lot. So in manifests, we have an ingress.yaml. I don't know why I'm not seeing host name. Maybe I'm crazy. Okay, either way, going back to Ballerina, getting off in the weeds here, we can go and we can run, not run, we want to paste in this Kubernetes config. So we have deployment and let's do service. So I think we only want to do a service. We're going to skip on the ingress stuff for right now because we can just use port forward. So let's try to keep this pretty simple. So we're going to copy in our deployment and paste this directly into our program here. We'll paste our deployment there. And we're going to go in and we're actually going to paste in our service as well. And the first thing I notice here is that we actually have this endpoint, which is an HTTP listener. I think this is required in order for us to actually do some binding between our program and the Kubernetes service. So I have an example here, and I'll push this code up to the repository after TGIK here in a second, where I was messing with it earlier, where I had an example of, yep, this is a very simple example. I like how simple this one is. Let's steal this code and come in and define it here. So here we have a Kubernetes service, service type node port, and remember this can be cluster IP or this can be load balancer if we want to expose it publicly, but we'll just keep it node port for now. And we're going to say it's Ballerina demo, and we're going to also steal, in our deployment, we're going to steal a couple of other directives as well. We're going to get image and we're going to get name. And this is going to be really important when we actually do a build, our first build later on. So let's go into our deployment and let's tab the stuff over and see if I can't save. We want a comma there. Now we're spec rules host. Okay, so Ismali says yes, it was there. It was spec rules host, and that maps to the host name. I was actually looking for the string host name. I thought it was host name for some reason. Thank you, Ismali. And yeah, he says for ingresses, you can specify a host-based routing or UI-based one. Okay, so here for our deployment, we have done enable liveness, we have an image, we have a name. So it looks like it is an abstraction on top of the Kubernetes resource. It's not a one-to-one mapping. Ismali says, you're not crazy. Like, I'm a little crazy, let's be honest here. Like, half of my head is shaved, and I just broke my hand mountain climbing. So anyway, we have Kubernetes service. The name of our service is Ballerina demo. It's of type node port. Name is Ballerina demo. Like, let's change this to TGIK for fun. And we're going to change this to Kris Nova / we'll do TGIK Ballerina. In fact, let's do TGIK-Ballerina for everything. So let's delete all of this. And we'll come in and we'll call TGIK Ballerina here. Samira says Kubernetes deployment annotation should be specified at the service level. So so what Samira is saying right now is this annotation should map to the service. So we're putting that here at the service level, not at the endpoint level, which we see internally here. And here we have our endpoint defined. And I think, I'm unsure if this is redundant. I'm curious to see what Samira has to say here, but this is how I got it working a little bit earlier. And so the question I have for you, Samira, is line 7 through 13 here redundant to the endpoints defined down here for say hello and say goodbye? Or is this little snippet here necessary? And what's the logic, what's actually going on behind the scenes? So curious, we're going to kind of hack on it and see what we can just figure out, and that might make some of it make sense. But if you can give us any pointers, that would be muchly and greatly appreciated. Okay, so we have our service and we have our deployment. So this is the really cool part about Ballerina. And in fact, before we do that, no, actually, you know what? I'm just going to let this happen naturally. We're going to try to do a build, and hopefully something breaks, because I want to show folks kind of how to do some debugging with Ballerina that has been working for me. So in order for us to do a build, let's go back to our blog here. And you can see the example here says we do Ballerina build, and then the name of the Ballerina file we want to build. So I guess for me, what I've noticed with interacting with Ballerina over the past 2 days, which basically makes me an expert now, is running is to run the program locally, and building allows you to build several different types of constructs. So if you do like a Go build in the Go programming language, there is one artifact that if you do everything correctly that you'll get. Well, there's also some PKG artifacts as well, but those are like usually hidden to most users. The artifact most users concern themselves with is the statically linked binary that the Go compiler spits out. In the case of Ballerina, we could get a lot of different artifacts, and we're going to kind of see what happens after we do our first Ballerina build. So we're going to jump in our terminal. I'm going to close this. I'm going to go into our Go path again. Go source github.com. Sorry, my 3 fingers on my left hand, which is my tab hand, are the ones that are broken. So all of my tabs are usually just like 3 broken fingers just kind of hitting the side of my keyboard and hoping for the best. So go source github.com/heptio/TGIK/episode/042/live, which is where we are. Aww. Why did that not work? 042. Oh, /examples/live. That's why. Okay, that was a really long path. Okay, so here's our tgik.bal. And if you look, there's nothing else here. So let's do our first build. B, short for Ballerina, build tgik.bal. B not found. I should really add that to my bash profile, but actually, you know what? I can do this without even opening up my bash profile. Echo alias B is equal to Ballerina. Put that at the end of my bash profile. Bam. Okay, so now we're not going to have that problem again. Okay, so now we can do B build tgik.bal. I got a slash. Let's try that again. B build tgik.bal. Oh, perfect. Okay, good. Something went wrong. And so a couple things just happened all at the same time. Number 1, Samira replied in chat, and then number 2, I made a very, very common but very, very expensive mistake that we're going to look at in my IDE in a second. So first, let's see what Samira says. Sure, on line number 23, so let's look at line 23. He says, on line number 23, replace port 9090 with listener.listen is the name of the endpoint defined above. Oh, so we can have a pointer to this endpoint definition. So I think he says we do, and I'm sorry, Samira, I didn't ask your pronouns. I'm assuming you're a he, him. If that's not the case, I'm really sorry. Let me know and I'll use the right ones. So let's do listener.listener. I think that might be right. Where's our listener defined? It's capital listener. So I bet we want to do HTTP listener.listener, maybe? Nope, that doesn't look right either. Maybe it's just capital listener.listener. Sure, replace line number 23, port 9090 with listener. Oh, with listener, and then that's the end of his sentence, or their sentence. So let's do that. I think that's what we want. Let's save that and see. Listener is the name of the endpoint defined above. Port 9090 is some sort of an inline endpoint. Replace the whole port 9090 with listener. Okay. This is the correct syntax here. Perfect. And see how I got the tab hinting? That's how I know that was the right syntax. Okay, so this is a pointer to this. And when I say pointer, I guess I should probably be saying the word reference. It's not, I don't think it's an actual pointer. It might be implemented as a pointer, I don't know. But we're going to say reference to our endpoint defined here on port 90. This is fantastic. Thank you, Samira. So going back, let's look at this error we just got. So right now it says undefined package, undefined annotation, undefined package. Oh my gosh, what's going on? And then I realized, oh, I'm super lazy from using Go imports. I neglected to import our Kubernetes package here. So we want to do import Ballerina X /Kubernetes semicolon. So now I bet if we clear our screen, run it here, we can stop this server just while we're waiting for that to run. So Control-C will clear that. Oh, this is really exciting. Okay, so it says Kubernetes deployment, Kubernetes Docker. So the first time I did this, I was like, what in the heck just happened? And then I came through and I actually did a list, and you can see a lot of things just happened. Number one, we have Kubernetes as a directory. And if you look at this kubectl apply command, it goes into users, my name Nova, go path, source github.com, heptio, TGIK episodes 042, examples live / Kubernetes. So I bet if we go into our Kubernetes directory, we're going to see all of our manifests and all of our static YAML files. Let's see here. Bam. If we cat out TGIK deployment, it wouldn't be a TGIK unless we looked at YAML. Come on, this is like the highlight of the episode here. We go through and we can see, okay, Ballerina generated a Kubernetes deployment for us. That's pretty rad. Like, I didn't even have to like type anything or create a deployment and download it and modify it. And if we look, it imported Kris Nova / TGIK / Ballerina. So this is really cool because this takes this sort of construct of having an abstraction on top of your application where the abstraction lives here directly in the programming language instead of using some third-party tooling like Helm or Case on it. So we're actually able to simplify generating a Kubernetes deployment directly in our source code. So the deployment definition lives in the code that actually runs as a deployment. So those two are now tightly coupled together and like convince opinions whether or not you think that's a good idea or not. But that's pretty cool. I've never seen that before. So that deployment was generated from only defining these 3 directives. Everything else was sort of some sort of sane default. So if we go through here, I bet we could find some defaults. Like here's one right on the very next line. Image pull policy is set to if not present. And I'm guessing we could probably go through and change that. I'll give it like a quick try here because I got to head to the airport soon. But I bet if we did image pull policy set to always, reran our build, I'm wondering what it's going to try to do. This might work, but we'll see. Cannot find tgik.bal. Let's go up and try that again. Hey, and it looks like it's working. So cat, Kubernetes, what do we have in here? TGIK deployment. And hey, look at that, that actually worked. That was really cool. Image pull policy is now set to always. So cool, so you can go through and you can override whatever the heck you want and totally define your own deployments directly in your source code. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is our deployment is referencing Kris Nova, TGIK Ballerina. And this is a special string and it says it's going to pull from Docker Hub. So we better make sure that we have some sort of container up and running, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. A container image that's stored in the Docker registry up in Docker Hub so we can get that up and running in Kubernetes. So what I want to do is I want to check and see if Ballerina built a Docker image on my local file system for me to push up to Docker Hub. So how I can do that is I can do Docker images. And let's do case insensitive grep minus lowercase I for TGIK. There it is. Wow. Okay. This is going surprisingly well. So Kris Nova, TGIK Ballerina, and we have the TGIK operators from where we did the operator framework and talked about puffins a couple of weeks ago. So let's go ahead and push up. And look, it even called it latest for us. Like it didn't call it canary or anything like that. It's actually using the word. So I like the word latest for image tags. It's a personal thing of mine, and I'm really happy Ballerina just did that. Okay, so Docker push Kris Nova, TGIK Ballerina, and we'll just go ahead and be explicit here, and we'll say latest. So that's pushing up to Kubernetes. Ismaili had a great question, which is where is the Docker file for Ballerina? We're going to look at the Docker file. Just one second, Ismaili. So that is totally pushed up to Docker Hub now. Let's go ahead and I always like to check the size and just kind of like sanity check that everything is as expected in the UI, even though UIs are not always the most reliable thing to look at. So let's log into Docker Hub, TGIK Ballerina, Docker pull Kris Nova, TGIK Ballerina. Poof. So that looks like it's good. And Ismaili's question, where is a Docker file? So we can Emacs, Kubernetes, oh, that hurt my finger. Let's tab. Inside of Kubernetes, we now have Docker. And then inside of Docker, we have Dockerfile. Let's take a look and see what's going on here. Nicholas D, is there a way to specify the API group versions? For instance, to use apps v1 deployment instead of extensions v1 beta 1 deployment. I'm assuming in this little blurb here, you would be able to define that. But let's see if Samira can answer that question for us. If we don't get an answer in the next minute or two, I'll tinker and try a few things and see if we can't get that defined for you there, Nicholas. But that's a great question, which is like, how does Ballerina handle the different levels of the YAML? Because right now we edited image pull policy, and that's buried a few layers deep, whereas the version is like a first-class citizen in the deployment YAML, which we pulled up earlier, but we can pull it up again and see it's like actually on like in the first 2 or 3 lines or something, and it's indented all the way over. So let's go back to our Emacs here. It says auto-generated Docker file. So from Ballerina, looks like Ballerina not only has a programming language, but actually went as far as creating a Docker image for us to build on. Level equals maintainer. Let's change that to some real information here. So let's do Kris at fabulous.af. And it says copy tgik.balx to /home/ballerina. I have been thinking, and Samira, please correct me if this is wrong, I have been thinking about the balx files as like a compiled Python file or as like a jar file, which sort of acts as our artifact that we're going to run, and that's why we're copying it. We're exposing port 9090 in our container, which is the same port we defined on our endpoint in our service earlier, and it says command ballerina run tgik.balx. Very simple, very discrete Docker file. Makes me happy. So let's get out of here. We're going to save it. We could do a rebuild and repush. Yeah, actually, why not? Let's do that. Let's go up 2 levels, and let's run our build command again. Cannot find tgik.bal. Oh, go into examples. Yeah, there we go. And now let's run our build command again. What? Oh, live. Now let's clear, and then run our tgik again. Rebuild it. It's generating our deployment for us. Let's cat out our deployment so I can show folks. Deployment. This is the question that we just had, which is how would you change this directive here, extensions v1 beta 1 to something else. So just real quick, while we have our build command handy, let's just try to do this and just see what happens. It might be smart enough to where it just figures it out, which would be pretty cool. So if we come to our deployment, v1 beta 1, and we can just break this thing, and we're just going to call it, let's go into our chat, apps v1 deployment instead of extensions v1 beta 1 deployment. So we're going to do, I think this is the right string. Either way, we're not going to actually try to run this because it's not going to work because I'm running a newer version of Kubernetes. But let's do v1 deployment and rebuild our artifacts here. Bbuild tgik.bal, undefined field API version instruct. So my first attempt was not successful. Samira says balx is the binary file that the compiler produces with bytecode. So yes, that is the binary file. And it's similar to a java.class file. Thank you, Samira. Anyway, I do not know, Nicholas D, how to define the API version. Folks at home, if you want to tinker and try it out, maybe you can figure it out and let us know. I'm going to move on. We're almost out of time, and I want to get this thing up and running in Kubernetes and do some port forwarding. So without further ado, it wouldn't be TGIK without looking at YAML and without me typing kgitpo. So we don't have any pods running. And let's just see what else we have up in my cluster. Again, we're only going to be using the default namespace here. I don't even think I have any services defined. OK, I have the Kubernetes cluster IP service. Wow. So let's go and look at our YAML files. So we can do cat Kubernetes tgik deployment.yaml. We're going to apply this to Kubernetes and see what happens. So the first thing I want to check and see is just make sure this deployment looks sane. So we have replica count equal to 1. Looks like we define labels. We have app equal to tgik. This image looks like the correct image we want to pull from Docker Hub. We overrode image pull policy. Ballerina even defined a liveliness probe for us, which just opens up a TCP socket on port 9090. That's basically just going to say, hey, is there an open listening WebSocket there? Oh, good, there is. This thing's alive. It's running on container port equal to 9090, again, with our TCP protocol. No volume mounts, which that's like a whole other bucket of worms. If we ever want to start talking stateful applications with Ballerina, maybe we could do a follow-up episode. And then we don't have really anything else defined. These are all empty directives here at the end. So that deployment looks good to me. So let's go ahead and apply this. K apply -f, Kubernetes, TGIK, deployment.yaml, and let's cat out our service as well. Kubernetes, Samira, Nicholas D. Samira says, Nicholas, API versions are not supported at the moment, unfortunately. Okay, so it looks like they're in the abstraction for the Kubernetes objects in the Ballerina source code. There are things that aren't and are supported. Right now, you cannot change version. I'm going to go ahead and just say pull requests accepted in case anybody here wants to contribute to Ballerina. That'd be pretty rad. So cat Kubernetes, TGIK service. Wait, do I not have a service? Oh, SVC. It shortened it. Okay, so that's kind of annoying. This one was, instead of being deploy, it was full deployment, and instead of being verbose service, it was the shorthand SVC. The engineer brain of mine wants those always to be the same. So cat Kubernetes, TGIK, SVC.yaml. Let's see what we have here. Again, we have our app equal to TGIK. What is our selector? App is equal to TGIK. What was our app called up here? App TGIK. So that's going to map. We have port 9090, TCP, target port 9090, and we're node porting. This is a super simple Kubernetes example. So let's go ahead and apply it. K apply -f, Kubernetes, TGIK svc.yaml. So the service is now created, so now we have a service we can talk to. And we could change that service to type load balancer and expose it publicly. Actually, you know what? Why not? Let's do it publicly. No, I don't have time. We're not going to do it publicly. You guys have seen me do that before anyway. Okay, we're just going to do some port forwarding, and I really do need to get to the airport. So kget PO. So here's our pod that's running. Let's see if I can nail my port forward command right away. So k port forward, the name of our pod in our default namespace, and we want to do port 9090 to local host 9090. So that's forwarding. And if we come here to our local host, this should work exactly the same, except for the difference now is that this is running in a container in Kubernetes, or on Kubernetes, or with Kubernetes in Amazon, port forwarding back here to my TGIK MacBook, and then we should be able to resolve that on my local host, and then we would get all of the other wonderful primitives of Kubernetes that we could bake into our application as well using Ballerina. So if I refresh, super anticlimactic, but it worked. And I bet if we go to say goodbye, it's not going to work. Oh, let me change this. And I bet if we go to method not allowed, because we only have post defined, and I bet if we rerun our curl command here, let's see, curl http localhost port 9090 / say goodbye minus capital X capital post. It says goodbye world with no new line at the end, which is my bad. I think that's a problem in my source code. That looks good. Our service is good. We have it in a container. Ballerina made that really easy for us to get into a container, made it really easy for us to generate a deployment, made it easy for us to write a web service, and we have that up and running in Kubernetes. And I mentioned there's a little bit of a surprise at the end, and again, this did not occur to me until about an hour before I started TGIK today, that this was even a thing. But as I was going through the quick tour here, I'm scrolling down and I'm kind of looking, and we went through a lot of this. In this example, they talk about how you could actually, write an example Twitter integration. So if you're interested in actually communicating with another API, there's a working example on the quick start here. It talks about actually just building a Docker image and how there's also an abstraction on top of Docker as well as Kubernetes you can define arbitrary Docker things from, like for instance expose as one of the first class citizens here. And if you scroll all the way down to the end, I saw this and this caught my eye and I was like, whoa, what the heck is this thing? So if you actually, it says in the command line, type composer, which if you remember at the beginning of the episode, in the Ballerina package we downloaded, there was an executable called composer. Something exciting might happen if we go to localhost 9091. So I'm going to try to do my best to replay what actually happened to me earlier, which was I opened up my terminal. I opened up a new tab. Let's see if we can zoom in, resize, scoot this one over. And I came in and I actually just typed composer. And I was like not expecting this to work at all. And I typed it, and then like both my hands are up here. It's not doing anything right now. This is all just magically happening on my computer. We're now running this like web service, like this UI on my local host. And I'm like, well, what's going on? And it said, oh, look, there's create project. And I'm like, what? So I'm like, let's call this one, oh my God, TGIK. Create a project. This is where I started to kind of freak out. There's a graphical definition. I think you can interact with this thing, or at least you get a graphical output of your service, and it just generated all this code for us. So already it's like there's like documentation and there's like inline comments that explain what everything do, and we have callers and we have requests and we have like another say hello example. And remember earlier I said you didn't even need to download an IDE. I can edit this source code directly in my browser, come over here to the left and actually hit run, and it'll actually run my Ballerina file in my browser for me. So this is like unbelievable. I've never seen a programming language do anything like this. And this actually might be kind of fun to get this up and running in Kubernetes, because then you would be able to actually, for the first time, I've been waiting for this for so long, be able to develop directly in Kubernetes. You would just be doing it over your browser. So this is pretty cool, and it says, you have this try it button here. You can hit try it, and then you get this Postman style like API integration here where you can actually craft an API request and test your APIs directly. So Ballerina, because of this really cool compose feature, we could write a Docker image that runs compose and actually develop an application in Kubernetes and access it over port forward like we just did live, or we could access it over node port or a load balancer and actually start developing directly in Kubernetes. And I've never seen a Kubernetes development tool work like this. Like if you look at Draft, if you look at Scaffold, those are very much like build it, push it, run it. And this is like, no, just develop it in a browser directly in Kubernetes, and then we can worry about pushing it and building it later. So to me, this was like a really, really pleasant surprise at the end. I would love to come do a TGIK on doing some live development inside of Kubernetes with this tool and talk about pros and cons and what I like about it and how we could possibly use it to do some pretty cool stuff and really speed up our engineering cycle. So anyway, that's all the time we have for this week. I am 7 minutes overdue, late for the airport. So I'm going to give folks a few minutes to say goodbye. I know you folks on the other end are a few minutes behind me. And I'm going to do, as folks are saying goodbye, I'm going to kind of do a quick high level of what we were able to do on the episode to sort of encapture it in everybody's minds. So I'm going to go back to my face here and say thanks again for joining. Kris Nova, the introduction to Ballerina. We got the console up and running. We were able to learn about services and endpoints and how you can configure different HTTP verbs. Some GET, some POST. I'm sure the whole HTTP protocol is supported. And actually learn about Ballerina and how we can start building out like microservices. Then we learned about how Ballerina build was a little bit unique, how it generated our Docker image for us. We were able to push that up to a registry, and we were able to actually get that running up in Kubernetes with a deployment that Ballerina also generated for us. So this was a really exciting episode, gave us a lot of information here and got me kind of excited about maybe like there are new ways we can start thinking about cloud native and Kubernetes. And I think this is a total great example of somebody who rethought what the development story might be for a user now that we're into this sort of new cloud native way of doing things. So yeah, very impressed with Ballerina, very impressed with the primitives behind it. Would love, absolutely love to see a similar user story here for other programming languages like Golang. And in general, like big round of applause to the folks working on Ballerina. I think this stuff's great. Can't wait to see more of this and see where it goes in the future. So yeah, we totally have some goodbyes here. We have goodbye from Ismaili. Samira, you've been very helpful today. Thank you so much for your help. Noah Abraham says, okay, I totally have a new project. Kazlin, good to see you, Kazlin. Didn't know you were here. Says cool stuff. Thanks, Chris. Samira, great demo. Olav, cool indeed. Okay, I'm off to the airport. I'm going to go rock climbing. I'll see you folks next week. I don't know what we're going to be doing next week, but yeah, feel free to open up an issue in the TGIK issue tracker or ping me on Twitter or let us know what you think, and we will be picking a new episode next week, and I will see you folks then. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye. Looks like Waleed. So yeah, have a great weekend. We'll see everyone later. Cheers.